Power isn't given to her. She takes it, reshapes it, and wears it like a crown in Atlanta, 1996. The skyline shimmered beneath the orange haze of late afternoon, glass towers catching the sun like liquid gold. From the corner office of the Peachtree Building, Danielle Ross stood with her arms folded, staring down at the city that once ignored her. Now it moved to her rhythm. Her reflection in the glass was steady, sharp. White silk shirt tucked into tailored black pants, her hair pulled into a tight bun. She wasn't dressed for admiration, she was dressed for battle. Behind her, the hum of a fax machine and the rhythmic clicks of her assistant's typewriter painted the soundscape of ambition. Just a decade ago, Danielle had been a junior accountant at a small firm on Auburn Avenue, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and living off instant noodles. She still remembered the manager who told her, "You've got the brains, sweetheart, but not the backbone for big business." Now that same man's company was one of her clients. Success, she'd learned, was the quietest form of revenge. Every morning, Danielle arrived before sunrise. The streets of downtown Atlanta were still half asleep, but she was already reviewing reports, analyzing stock trends, and making calls to suppliers before the markets even opened. While others chased comfort, Danielle chased control. Control over her destiny, her time, and her story. Her father had been a factory worker, a quiet man who believed respect wasn't about how much money you had, but how you carried your name. Her mother ran a small diner, where Danielle learned the art of responsibility. That you cleaned your own tables, counted your own tips, and never waited for someone to rescue you. That diner was gone now, bulldozed to make room for an office complex. Ironically, her company, Ross Enterprises, owned part of that complex. Life had come full circle, but Danielle carried the lessons like gospel. Work with purpose. Earn respect quietly, never forget where you began. Ross Enterprises started as a logistics consulting firm, advising mid-sized companies on supply chain management. Danielle saw an opening where others saw routine. By 1994, she had transformed it into a multi-million-dollar network. Part finance, part real estate, part strategy. She became known in Atlanta's business circles as the Tycoon in heels. She never liked the nickname, but she understood what it meant. She had crossed into a world that rarely made room for women who didn't ask permission. At 36, Danielle wasn't just wealthy, she was respected. But power, she knew, was a double-edged thing, admired in daylight, envied in the dark. The challenge came in the form of a hostile takeover attempt. A New York investment group wanted to buy Ross Enterprises, not because they admired her vision, but because they wanted her out of the way. They offered a number that made her board lean forward with interest. Danielle leaned back. She studied their proposal, eyes calm but calculating. When the lead investor said, "Ms. Ross, you could retire with this deal and never work again," she smiled faintly and replied, "If I wanted to rest, I wouldn't have built this." The meeting ended with firm handshakes and sharper glances. They underestimated her, and she used that underestimation as fuel. Within 3 months, she secured a partnership with a Houston-based transport firm that doubled her valuation and crushed the takeover before it began. Power, she'd learned, wasn't just about owning the table. It was about knowing when to flip it. Her employees both admired and feared her. Danielle didn't believe in coddling, she believed in excellence. Her team knew that when she said 5 minutes, she meant 4.5. But she paid fairly, rewarded loyalty, and mentored fiercely. Every Friday, she gathered her department heads and asked the same question. What did you do this week that made someone take you seriously without you asking for it? It became a mantra inside the company, the unspoken creed of respect. Outside the office, she was often seen as cold, unapproachable, but that was fine with her. She didn't need warmth to lead, she needed direction. Still, on quiet nights when the office lights dimmed and Atlanta's skyline glowed like embers, she sometimes felt the weight of solitude. Her power had bought her influence and isolation. She dated occasionally. Lawyers, executives, men who seemed intrigued by her confidence but intimidated by her independence. It always ended the same way. One of them once said, "You act like you don't need anyone." Danielle had smiled softly. "I don't act." She wasn't cruel, just certain. She had built too much to depend on anyone's validation. One evening, after another 12-hour day, she found herself on the rooftop terrace of her office building. The sun was sinking, throwing streaks of gold and crimson across the sky. Atlanta pulsed below. Cars, voices, lights, the heartbeat of the city she'd conquered. She stood there in silence, thinking of her mother's diner and the smell of coffee and fried eggs that used to fill the mornings. She thought of her father's rough hands, the way he'd said, "Baby girl, whatever you build, make sure it can stand even when you're not there." The wind brushed her hair loose and she smiled faintly. He would have been proud. Weeks later, the Atlanta Business Review invited her to deliver the keynote at their annual summit. The hall was filled with the city's top investors and CEOs. Danielle took the stage in her usual calm, measured stride. The cameras flashed, microphones tilted toward her. She didn't begin with a quote or a greeting. She began with truth. "People think success is about money," she said, her voice even, deliberate. "But money comes and goes. The real currency is respect, and respect doesn't come from titles or applause. It comes from the choices you make when no one's watching." The room fell silent. Even the cameras paused between flashes. "I built my empire brick by brick," she continued. "Not because I wanted power, but because I needed freedom. Freedom to decide, freedom to define. And I won't apologize for that." Applause erupted, long, full, and genuine. That night, as she drove home down Peachtree Street, the city lights blurred through her windshield. She didn't feel invincible, only grateful. For the struggle, for the solitude, for the hunger that had built her. She pulled into her driveway, stepped out of her black Mercedes, and looked up at the moon hanging over Atlanta's skyline. For the first time in a long while, she whispered to herself, "You did it, Danielle, and you did it your way." And somewhere deep inside, she knew power wasn't her prize, it was her purpose. To be continued. Like and subscribe for the continuation.